Hello there, and welcome back. I've got Dr. Larissa Strath on for her second appearance, and as promised, we get a chance to talk a little bit about how some of the ideas that we discussed in her education earlier on can be applied directly to your diet and your behavior and ultimately to your health. We start off a little bit with everybody's favorite and do a little bit of background, but if you stick around toward the second half of the episode, you can hear about some foods that specifically can be incorporated into your diet, and at the very end, a phenomenal resource, I can't underscore this enough, that she is a part of that's free, and you can get even more information and even classes if you want, but we'll include it at the end of the show. You gotta stick around for it. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Welcome to The Price of Pain, brought to you by the Pain Research and Intervention Center of Excellence at the University of Florida. Let's join host Dr. Joshua Crow in conversations with scientists, healthcare providers, and industry professionals as we delve into the highly subjective experience of pain and the ongoing effort to reveal its influence on our everyday lives.
In all seriousness, we got a chance to talk a lot about your dissertation work, but we didn't talk about what led up to that. And one of the favorite things that our listeners do give feedback on is that for whatever reason, they think that our guests are the most interesting people ever and love to hear about where they came from and how they got to where they are. And in this case, the they is you. So
I hope I live up to their expectations.
Yeah. So you gave a little bit about UAB, but I have the advantage of knowing you, so I don't want to make any assumptions that, oh yeah, that's a given. So what was the first moment that, not even necessarily pain research or even diet, what was the first moment that you thought like, hey, I've got an idea, I'm going to college and I want to study? Was it
blank?
Yeah.
It was not. Well, okay. Well, I would say growing up, my dad was a high school science teacher. My mom also taught high school, but she taught business and law, and unfortunately, none of her kids went into business or law. So they both went into like science, social science.
Right.
But my dad, he was a high school physics, chem, bio teacher. So he was always bringing cow eyeballs back. Like I have memories of doing that in the garage and like pulling them apart and dissecting them and getting a microscope and finding dead bugs and pulling them apart and looking under the microscope. So
that's okay.
That was my childhood.
Also risk factors for sociopathic behavior.
Okay. We got and like dissecting fish on the dock and all that stuff.
Did you say what age level he was a science teacher for? Was it high school?
High school.
Okay.
High school, yeah. So he taught high school physics, chem for a little bit, and then mainly physics and biology.
Cool.
But just that was probably from a young age, just loved science. Loved it. That was always my favorite subject. I was good at it and I liked it. So I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to be something related to science and healthcare. And at first I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist because I really liked sports. I played all kinds of sports growing up to the point where I had to like pick.
Were you a tomboy?
Yes.
Pulling bugs apart.
Pulling bugs apart.
Cutting fish on the dock.
Yep.
Playing lots of sports.
Yes.
Got it.
And so I had to pick, and that's actually part of how I ended up getting here. Because if I'd gone a different direction, I wouldn't be here. So it was between soccer and figure skating. I was getting really competitive. I know contrast.
Okay. All right. I have to. I'm gonna interject here, and I don't want to derail this story because I'm bought in. Yeah. But nobody can say the words figure skating without me thinking of this movie called The Cutting Edge.
Oh, yeah.
D.B. Sweeney and Moira Kelly, right? Yep. This is early 90s. I remember it was one of my first like movie dates as a middle schooler. I'm outing myself on my age here. But just really quick, so it's he's a Canadian hockey player, right? And his career has like his career-ending injury to his eye. Yep. And so he gets an offer to go figure skating, like as a figure skating couples partner, right? Partner thing. But all of his family and all the guys at his brother's bar think that he's going off to join the Merchant Marine, right? And he comes home, and he's like, "Oh yeah, there's my brother," and blah blah blah, and all the the townsfolk. This is stereotypical country Canada, right? And they're at the bar, and there's like the Labatt's neon sign and all these things, right? And And so he has to tell his brother, he's like, yeah, I didn't go to join the Merchant Marine. He's like, well, what have you been doing? He's like, well, I've been doing a little figure skating. And you hear some guy in the back go, did he say finger painting? So anyway, I didn't mean to laugh at your story.
Soccer and finger painting.
Finger painting, soccer and finger painting.
Yeah, and I'm Canadian, so it's like,
tough
it's
call,
just,
right?
It was, I see where your brain went.
Yeah. So, okay.
But yeah, so I should start with that. I'm from the Toronto area.
Nice.
About 40 minutes north of Toronto, a place called Barrie. But while I was in Barrie, I had to pick between finger painting and soccer, figure skating. It was just getting super competitive. And I ended up picking soccer, which was probably the best decision, given that now we're sitting here, because, had wonderful coach, wonderful experiences, and ended up getting a soccer scholarship to come to the States.
So not only were you a soccer player, you were a good soccer player.
I was good enough to get paid to play and get my education.
I think that's a pretty good line of delineation there, right?
And it was interesting because at the time when I was kind of picking, I kind of had these two offers that were standing out, and it was Central Michigan and
the Chippewas,
and then the Faulkner University in Montgomery, smaller liberal arts college, and I ended up tearing my ACL. And I called, both coaches, and I said, this is what's up. I'm, only in grade 11, so I still have a year to recover, blah, blah, blah. And I remember the coach being like, you're probably going to ride the bench because we don't know, how you're going to be.
And you said the coach was a both coach?
This is at Central Michigan. It was like, we don't know how you're going to be, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, well, that's kind of disheartening. I called the other coach, and he was like, no, fine. You're just going to have to work hard, and we'll see how it goes. And so I was, more drawn to that school. And then I was also drawn to the fact that Alabama was going to be a very different lifestyle and just life experience than if I were to just go a couple hours, south from my home.
Michigan is, I may be biased, but Michigan is the geographic center of the universe.
Oh, yeah.
So you could do much worse.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I went all the way to Alabama. My mom said that she cried dropping me off and, leaving me. She's like, where am I leaving my child? So I was in Montgomery, Alabama. And that is where I did my undergrad. So I played soccer for 4 years. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was a ton of work being a student athlete. But it taught me a lot about, work-life balance and how to be efficient with your time and everything. We, made it to the national tournament. It was a lot of fun.
What division?
So it was NAIA.
Okay,
Division
perfect.
1. Yeah. And so it was so much fun. I still in touch with a lot of my teammates today.
What were you studying while you did this?
So I started as pre-physical therapy because that's what I thought I wanted to do because I'd spent a lot of time in rehab with my own knee. I was an athlete, and I was like, I'd love to work with athletes. And then I started taking my courses, and there's so much biology. And then I realized that I didn't like biology as much as I like chemistry.
Okay.
And that's not a lot of people say that because I think I'm more interested in the why rather than the what. So instead of what's happening, I want to know why that thing is happening. Why is this working the way it's supposed to be working? So I ended up switching majors because I was like, well, maybe I should go to med school. So I ended up going pre-med. And at the time, I was really interested in chemistry. They didn't have a biochemistry track, getting chemistry degrees because it was a small college. So I just minored in chemistry. So I was pre-med with a minor in chemistry. Did all those courses, loved biochemistry, fell in love with biochemistry.
You don't hear that very often.
I love it.
Don't hear that.
I am such a nerd for biochemistry. I loved that class. And was interesting because we had to take this research capstone class, and you had to do a research project. And I remember doing research with mice. At the time, I thought I was going to med school. And I remember saying, I don't know why anyone would want to do this every day. I hate these mice. I don't want to do research. Why would anybody want to do this? And I remember saying that to my mom. I was like, Mom, I don't like this. And so I go and
Was it the mice?
I don't know what it was, and I just at the time I hated it, and I think what it was is because it's a small college, you're working with what you've got,
right?
Which they went out of their way to help me for sure, but I mean it's not the same as if you were at like a big research heavy institution, so you're kind of like putting things together as you go, and I made this project of like I'm interested in diet just for my own reasons because right before I graduated high school, I was diagnosed with celiac disease, which for people who don't know is an autoimmune disorder where if you eat gluten, your body starts to attack itself. So kind of cut that out. And so I was just always interested in the way that diet affects health, just because it made such a big difference for me in my course of life. So I was like, I want to see cranberries and kale versus like your typical antibiotic on UTIs in mice and just see, what happens in terms of white blood cell count. So this was probably my first time that I really had to use my resources. So, and be collaborative because, again, small institution. We don't have all the machinery and all that stuff. And there was a guy that came in from Tuskegee to do a presentation, and he was like, yeah, we've got flow cytometers and all this stuff. And I was like, so I went up to him and I was like, hey, long shot question, but if I used my little research budget and bought the reagents and like brought the samples, could you run some flow cytometry on the urine and the blood for me? And he was like, sure, if you can get the samples here, blah, blah, blah. So
That's pretty industrious of you. All right. Wow.
So, packed up my little urine samples. I was able to like spin down all the blood samples and, drove really fast up the highway. It's about 35 minutes from Montgomery.
What kind of window
Tuskegee.
do you have? Like
trying to as fast as possible because they're frozen.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was able to do all the flow cytometry. He taught me how to do it. Taught me how to read it. He was super kind. He didn't charge me for his time or anything like that. And basically saw that this heavy duty cranberries and kale supplementation was just as good as this antibiotic in the mice.
Really?
And that was my project.
So when you say just as good, what were your outcome measures for the UTI? Was it a threshold as far as the
white blood cell
just
count.
The white blood cell count.
And then body temperature.
Okay.
And then just some behavioral things that I thought, like, again, I didn't have much training, but
any pain testing of any kind with those mice yet?
Not with that. That came later. So, and I remember we had to go present our findings at the Alabama Academy of Arts and Sciences conference. And I remember driving up, and I was so over my research project at this point. And I was on the phone with my mom, and I went, I'm never doing this again. Why? I'm off to like some nerd convention where I have to present my science and blah, blah, blah. And get there, and, I'm presenting my poster, and this man walks up, and he's asking me all these questions, and he goes, so what are your plans after, you finish college? This is in, like, February of my senior year.
Oh, okay.
I was planning on taking a gap year, writing the MCAT, going to med school. PhD, not on my radar at all. Like I said, I really was not happy with my place.
Yeah.
So I told him, I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to go home and, write the MCAT and maybe go to med school. He was like, oh, where's home? And I said, oh, it's in Canada. He goes, well, where in Canada? I was like, the Toronto area. He goes, well, where? I'm from Hamilton. I was like, what? I'm from Barrie. And so that's about 2 hours.
Close? Okay.
2 hours, like 1 hour on each side of Toronto. And so he's like, spoiler alert, this guy ended up being my PhD mentor.
Very cool.
So he was like, well, we'll be in touch. And, in that excitement of, well, there's a Canadian in Alabama. Wow. Forgot to exchange contact information. So he ended up reaching out to my undergrad professor, and she loved Dr. Fungiday. She, again, probably one of the reasons I'm here. But she's tough. Like, she is a tough cookie. And was like, I do not want to ever be on her bad side. So I was like, I'm a senior. I've stayed on her good side. And I get this text from her. And she's like, you need to come to my office right now. And I'm just like, oh, my gosh, what have I done?
She didn't text your middle name, did she?
No.
Oh, okay.
She just said, you need to come to my office. And I was like,
that's how you know when you're really in trouble.
And so I come, and she's like, well, I just heard from Rob Sorge. Do you remember him? And I went, yeah. He goes, they talked to the BN program director, and because like interviews were over for this incoming class, and they're like, they have enough money for one more person, and Rob said that if you want to come, you can come in July. And I went, well, I think I'd be an idiot to like pass this one up.
Right.
And so I told my mom, I was like, I think I'm going to UAB. And she was like, I mean, it sounds like a great plan. And I was like, but I'm just worried because, again, he's a basic science guy.
Right.
It's mice. I'm just not too sure. So I went up and, talked to him and interviewed with a couple people. And he was telling me, he's like, no, I'm trying to get into like the clinical space as well and trying to get more translational. So you'd be working on clinical projects mainly.
Perfect.
You'd be doing a little bit of mice stuff, but mainly clinical stuff. And so that convinced me. I was like, I'm trusting you because you're Canadian.
All right, so I'm going to interject another story. This one's a little more personal. We're not going to talk about finger painting on this one.
Okay.
This explains a lot of this phenomena here. When I started, I believe it was when I started my master's program. I'll leave this this professor unnamed.
Okay.
Because, who knows who will listen to this. And I don't want to sully his name. But I'm originally from Michigan, as I hinted at earlier. And it's not that I feel out of place down here, but it's, worlds apart, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I meet Canadians, it's a little bit more home, right? Northerners, other hardy people.
Yeah, we're hardy.
They had hardy people. And so I was excited talking to this guy. We're getting together and play this Frisbee group, right? Mm-hmm. This is all the clues I'm going to give. And I said, oh, yeah, I met some other people I think might come and play. And I said, so-and-so. And I was like, oh, and this one, he's a Canadian. And he just kind of shakes his head. And I went, what, you don't like Canadians? And he said, and I quote, man, Canadians are like fleas. There's never just one of them.
Nope.
Now I know why. Right?
We find each other.
That's right.
There was a whole Facebook group I was a part of, and it was called Canadians in Alabama.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah, that's a great band name for the record.
Canadians in Alabama.
Yes.
Anyway, so I did end up going. Fell in love. He did, pain and diet stuff, and that was mainly what drew me in. I had, again, no interest in a PhD. I had no particular interest in pain at the time. At
this point, though, with pain and diet, what kind of give us a pulse read on that? Because a lot of people are probably, we have a bit of a mixed audience where some people are very familiar with the research and some people are learning this for the first time.
Right.
And so how at that point did, at least and this was with Sorge?
Yes.
How did his research, how did pain and diet intersect there? What was he most interested in? Was it just inflammatory stuff? Or?
Yeah, so he was mainly interested in how diet can affect the immune system, which can then go on to influence pain. Because as you've probably spoken to other people on this podcast, is, pain is not just a neurological phenomenon. The immune system is heavily involved. So looking at a lot of, inflammation, white blood, different types of white blood cells. And he was one of the people, him and his postdoc mentor, Jeff Mogul, that, kind of parsed out the fact that males and females, because of their kind of dimorphic immune systems, basically are processing pain differently. And that's why a lot of the drugs that we, design and test on male mice don't go on to work for females.
Yeah, right? If somebody had only anticipated that we may actually be just a little bit different.
I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Men are from, what is it? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
That's what they say. Yeah. Except for me, I'm just from Michigan.
Yeah. I'm from, Canada. It's its own little place.
So at this point, you said you're more interested in diet, and this is the first time that pain kind of blipped on your radar.
Yeah.
Did you instantly have an idea of how you wanted to apply your interest to that, or Or at that point, was it really, well, okay, I'm going to follow your lead in...
Yeah, so I followed his lead because this is the other funny part, is that neuro and like neuroscience was my worst anatomy course. And here I am in this neuroscience PhD program.
Best place to learn, right?
And I was just like, I like food. I like eating it. I like learning about it. And so I was kind of just following his lead. But then one great thing about Rob is he will sit and listen to your ideas. And so I remember, taking one of my electives, I took a nutrition course. It was nutritional biochemistry because I loved it. It was a 6 credit hour course in the summer. It was
wow,
a
sounds brutal.
lot of information, but I loved it. And I remember like screaming into his office one day, I'm like, we need to look at oxidative stress and carbs. And he was like, why? And so I just sat down and I explained to him. I was like, because oxidative stress can, promote inflammation. It can cause neuropathy. It can like do all this stuff. I just like laid it all out there, and he just said, okay, we're going to do that. And that actually led to my first author publication with him.
Very cool.
Which was when we looked at, because at the time we were working on the clinical trial of, doing an intervention with a low carb versus low fat diet versus control to see what would help. And we knew that the low carb diet was helping because we could see that in the stats over a period of 12 weeks in terms of pain, but we didn't know why, because the inflammatory markers weren't telling the story, which was interesting. They really didn't change over time. But so we couldn't really figure out like what was going on. And so I was like, we need to take the blood and we need to test for oxidative stress. And as it turned out, that appeared to be the driver. So as their oxidative stress went down because the amount of carbohydrates went down to be oxidized, their pain decreased.
Now, this is a point where I usually interject because there are some terms that people may not be familiar with. And we've covered in other episodes the concept of inflammatory markers. But just give a brief Cliff's Notes explanation of you don't have to run through the gamut of all the interleukins and everything, but just some of the things that you were looking for and what role they play in the inflammatory cascade, if you can, so people understand. And then oxidative stress, because oxidative stress is a term that some people may have never even heard.
Yes.
And others have heard and they don't know what it is because they don't get down to the basic science.
Right.
So
and oxidative stress
let's remediate.
Is my biochemistry baby.
That's
so
right.
I love oxidative stress. So
you're uniquely qualified to explain this to our highly intelligent, interested, yet perhaps uninformed audience.
Exactly.
Okay.
So basically in terms of inflammation, we're looking at inflammatory biomarkers, kind of looking at 2 different classes of them. One group being pro-inflammatory, so more associated with pain, more associated with an active, immune response.
So these are things that cause inflammation as part of a repair supposed to be part of a repair process to
and
trauma.
That's the thing. I mean, especially when you get into the media, people freak you out about inflammation.
Right. And
I mean, it's a completely normal, healthy bodily response. You would be dead without it, so don't be afraid of it.
Right.
But we just don't want it to be chronic.
Right.
That's the thing.
And much of the, and if I can fill in the blanks here, because we do intersect a little bit in our expertise here, but most of the signaling that your body sends itself, so we have a few systems that the body communicates with itself, but one of them is through these chemicals that pass through the blood. And so it's a unique kind of mix between an active and passive communication system. But that's when you talk about pro-inflammatory chemicals or molecules that they're coming through the bloodstream, it's a signal to start a process of repair.
Exactly.
Typically at a specific site, but that can get out of control.
Yeah, so that would be local inflammation, what you're describing. But when we're talking about health concerns, we're talking about chronic systemic. Right. Systemic meaning whole body. And a lot of disorders such as diabetes, depression, all those kinds of things, we touched on that, I think, in the last episode, have an inflammatory component, a pro-inflammatory component. The flip side of that is your anti-inflammatory cytokines, which basically as your pro-inflammatory cytokines go up, your anti should also go up in a normal response as the repair process continues and we need to kind of calm things back down.
Right.
And when you have chronic systemic inflammation, you really want to get those anti-inflammatory compounds, circulating and trying to calm the storm, basically. But in our case, we didn't really see much change in the 8 to 12 weeks. It usually takes a little bit longer to see any changes for inflammation. But when we talk about oxidative stress again, I'm going to get really excited about it.
Go ahead, nerd out on it.
So oxidative stress is basically this imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants. So free radicals are basically these, molecules, atoms, if you want to get that small, that are missing electrons. They're missing energy, and all molecules and atoms want to be complete. They want all the energy they need to feel, safe and satisfied, just like we would.
Right.
So they'll go around and, and that's the basis of all chemical reactions, is the swapping of energy and all that kind of stuff, like swapping of the electrons. But free radicals are missing these electrons. They're missing that energy, and they will take from anybody that they see. They'll take from molecules.
Seems kind of rude, but all right.
It is rude. But again, nothing to be scared of, because again, oxidative stress free radicals also signaling in the body to start different processes.
Right.
We just don't want to get it out of control as per usual. But basically what happens is they'll take electrons, energy from these cells that make up your eye, for example. And it'll cause damage to the cell, or it'll cause the cell to die. And sometimes the damage can be to the DNA, and that's when you can get cancers, all those kinds of things. Majority of the time, if you think of things like different retinopathies, a lot of the time there's a lot of oxidative stress causing just damage to the nerves in the eye. So they're taking for whatever they can get. Now, on the other hand, you have your antioxidants, and there's two different classes. There's endogenous, meaning we have them already. They're in our body. We were born with them. Antioxidants that are enzymes that have the ability to share their electrons really, really well, and basically neutralize them, and then the free radicals move along their way. They don't need to take from your eye cell anymore. And then you have your exogenous antioxidants, meaning these are the ones you get from your food. There's a lot more exogenous than there are endogenous, and that is why so many people are like, you need to eat your antioxidants, and nobody knows why they need to eat their antioxidants. But basically it's to neutralize those free radicals so they don't cause any damage. So in terms of pain, and what we saw in that study was the carbohydrates went down. So one of the primary sources for Westerners at least, of oxidative stress is excess carbohydrates. We love carbs, myself included, but the problem is we also love simple carbs, and those are very quickly processed. And when you have an overabundance of them, your body's really trying to, crank them out. There's naturally produced free radicals during carbohydrate metabolism. And if there's not enough antioxidants to kind of neutralize the excess, you're going to start having problems like neuropathy. It can cause inflammation. It can cause cell damage, cell death. It can cause, cancers and things like that. So what we found was when they switched over to a low-carb diet, not only were they, reducing the amount of refined sugar, carbohydrates they were eating, but because lower carbohydrate foods tend to be high in antioxidants, they were also getting more antioxidants.
So it's like a double bang for the buck.
Exactly.
Got it.
We gotta love vegetables. We gotta love our vegetables. So what we saw basically was this drastic reduction in oxidative stress, and that was directly correlated with reductions in pain scores when we did things like chair stands, temporal summation of mechanical pain, all the things. So that was really, really cool. So then I kind of started going, inflammatory adjacent, but also looking at oxidative stress, because oxidative stress can also influence inflammation as well. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got to the dissertation part. And then ended up going to NAPS, North American Pain School.
That's where you get to like do the whitewater rafting and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
And
I need to go to that.
you need to go.
You need to go to that, yeah.
And met Roger. We'd met like prior at conferences, and he
Episode 1 for the
Yes.
Dr. Fillingham for
Yes.
episode 1. Yeah.
We'd met. He came to UAB because he was a UAB behavioral neuroscience grad, and gave a talk. We'd met there. We met. I think it was at USASP when it was APS, and then. But
These
really
are
got to know
societies, by the way. So
yeah. Oh yeah.
we
Yeah,
get together and nerd out together, and sometimes in small groups, and then there's an annual conference
Yes.
where science is shared, and you get opportunity to network and present your work and so on and so forth. So the U.S. Association for the Study of Pain, USASP. If you want to look that up, there's some really cool stuff that comes through there. Please continue.
And then went to NAPS, got to know him a lot better there, and that was when he said, if you're interested in postdocing, like this is what's going on at UF. He got me in touch with Yenisel Cruz Almeida. I think she's episode 2.
It might very well be. One of my favorites for sure.
Yes, 2 or 3, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And now I am her postdoc, so I am doing.
They didn't bait you with it. They didn't say like we have a Canadian already here. They didn't do anything like that.
They didn't do anything like that.
Okay.
They were just like, you should come to Florida. Look at this cool science that we're doing.
Right.
Well, and they kind of baited me too with, we've got nutrition data.
Yeah.
Please do something. And
Yeah.
so I was like, ooh, okay. And so now I'm looking primarily at vitamin D specifically, and epigenetics. So for people who aren't familiar with that term, so genetics is like the study of your DNA code, and mutations in the code and all that stuff. Epigenetics is the study of how your body uses that DNA. So how our genes are being expressed, not necessarily any changes to the to the DNA itself, but changes to how it's being expressed. And so probably within the last, I'd say 10 to 15 years, we've learned that there's a vitamin D receptor that's not only present on cells, but also present as like a transcription factor. And being deficient in vitamin D, we've known for so long being deficient in vitamin D is bad. Like it leads to bad health outcomes.
Right.
Why that is, we haven't really known, and that vitamin D receptor has been huge.
So did the vitamin D receptor and the discovery of that, did that come around the completion of the human genome? Is that when people found that, or was it more recent even?
More recent than that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's come with technology.
Yeah.
And then also the fact that, that vitamin D receptor, in order for it to work, it has to combine forces with the retinoid receptor, which is vitamin A. They have to kind of come together. So my research kind of is going in the direction of how are these two vitamins regulating the epigenome, and how is that influencing pain? Because I think that's kind of an untapped reservoir. Epigenetics is a very young science.
Yeah, and so on that note, I'm gonna act as a proxy a little bit for our audience and simultaneously make sure I have my understanding correct, because I may be delving into a little bit of my own foray into epigenetics here shortly. So you have your DNA, which is basically it's almost like the instruction manual, right?
Exactly.
And based on that instruction manual, your body will transcribe that to form proteins, and all kinds of things happen in concert with that. But the epigenome or epigenetics is how or why some of that doesn't get, it's written, but it doesn't get used. The instruction, like the page in the instruction manual, gets skipped or torn out or whatever. What influences that? Is it behavioral? Is it, obviously it's not genetic, because the gene itself it's there, but it's not being used properly. So
So it is.
Bridge that gap for me.
Yeah. So it's really cool because it's kind of a little bit of anything external in your environment, but also psychological, social components as well. So environmental in terms of like diet, exposure to air pollution, all that, exposure to pesticides, toxins, all those things. But even things like chronic stress, negative childhood experiences, neighborhood disadvantage, low socioeconomic status, is what we talked about, last time. Those can also all influence the way your genes are expressed. And so, that's probably one of the reasons why we see such poor health outcomes when you're looking just at like social environments. The hypothesis is that's the link between, the social and then the biological.
Because you hear all the time, well, you may have a genetic predisposition for, right? So let me take this to the next level, and it's totally okay if you don't have an answer for this.
Okay.
But I want to ask a nerd question of my own.
All right.
More often than not, when we discuss epigenetics, and it's, these either environmental or behavioral or psychological factors that prevent your body from reading its own instruction book on how to be.
Yep.
We often think of things that make you suboptimal, right? Because you think that your DNA is, it's how you're supposed to be, right? It's a combination of both parents, and it is what it is. But sometimes that instruction book results in things that are less advantageous, male pattern baldness.
Yes.
I don't know why that was the first thing that came to mind.
I don't know why.
Nearsightedness. Laugh it up, Eric. Eric's behind the camera laughing at this, but little as you know, I'm going to sign him up for this study where he has to shave his full beard off. That study does exist. If you have a full beard and you want to shave it, there's some literature around University of Florida. I'm sure they would love to have you participate. So nearsightedness, these things that are part of your genetic code, are there epigenetic hacks that could potentially turn a negative into a positive? And I'm sorry, if I'm nearsighted, and also I think that I might be thinning my hair a little bit. I don't know. So I'm with you all on that out there. I'm an ally. Is there anything that you've seen so far in your work that would allude to the fact that either dietary or behavioral adaptations could maybe result in affecting the gene or your epigenetics favorably?
Yes. That's the best part about epigenetics is it's like it can go.
You're
so smart.
This is the thing. I do like that. You can say, wait, hang on. Let me give you a moment of silence. Go ahead. What were you saying?
You're so smart.
All right. I do like that.
Insightful.
But usually I kind of go for, oh man, that's a good question. And if I can get really smart people on my podcast and have them say, oh, that's a good question, then that makes me feel validated.
Well,
so thank you for that.
Good question for sure, because that's the best part about epigenetics is what can be, changed to be negative can also be changed to be positive. So all of those factors, if you optimize them, like you're eating well, you're exercising, you're sleeping well, you try and keep a low stress, that's hard to do, but try and, practice stress management, all that kind of stuff. You can change your epigenome to be more favorable. And to kind of go back to your predisposition, well, there's a lot of people that are like,
not my predisposition. I'm just saying.
You mentioned, I have a biological predisposition for X, Y, Z.
Right.
But there's so many people who are like, well, my mom had diabetes, my grandma had diabetes, I'm just going to get diabetes. I've got a genetic predisposition.
Right. I'm not laughing at diabetes, sorry.
No.
I want to be perfectly clear. We have a lighthearted podcast here. Not making light of diabetes. Diabetes.
We're in the South, so, but just because you might have that genetic predisposition doesn't necessarily mean that gene has to be turned on.
Brilliant.
So you can eat right, exercise, do all these things, and you can not get diabetes. Just because your family had it doesn't mean you have to to have it and experience it. So all of those same factors, some of them are a little bit harder to change than others, but if you can try your best to take care of yourself as much as you can by eating right, sleeping right, exercising, all of those things, you can have a favorable epigenome.
So you are the diet expert, and I promised our listeners and viewers that we would get a little bit into playing upon that expertise to discuss some things that they could immediately do, exactly like we're talking about that. Actually, I couldn't have written that up better myself.
Segue.
I swear I don't have a script for this, but my expertise is, I just navigate the ship through this. We got right to where I was hoping to go to fulfill my word. What are some of these foods that stand out the most that you've seen? And if you want to just keep it specific to pain, that's fine. But I know that your education, your expertise in diet expands beyond pain. So feel free to bloviate on any of it.
Sure.
I'm sure people would love to know. Most certainly, you'll have some recommendations that they've heard ad nauseum, and maybe this will be the time that they say, "Oh, you know what? You're right. I should eat more leafy greens."
Yeah. Well,
so please.
Yeah, and so I often give talks with a church back in Birmingham, and I think they're tired of me saying you need to eat the rainbow because I always come on. I'm like, it's nutrition and cancer, or nutrition and pain, nutrition and this, blah blah blah. And I'm always like, eat the rainbow. And
Lucky Charms.
Yeah.
Lucky Charms is the key? Not the key.
I wish I could say yes.
Okay. So the rainbow.
The rainbow. So if you can try and get as many colors on your plate as you can, I almost think of it as like a challenge of like, can I get Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet on my plate, or as close to it as I can per meal, then I know I'm doing okay. Without having to, calculate math and do all those things, because some people don't want to weigh their food, they don't want to, and that can lead to disordered eating and all that stuff, and that's a whole other. Greta's up. My buddy's up. But so without having to stress about your food, that's the easiest way to do it, is to just try and get as many colors as you can on your plate. And if you're colorblind, get a friend to help you. But
I have a kind of a favorite pastime of cooking.
Okay, me too.
No training whatsoever, but I will say, I've got a lot of practice at eating.
Me too.
The thing I've noticed also, though, and maybe this is just me, but when not even going out of my way to do that for saying, oh, I have some reds here, I have some, whatever. The food that I prepare being more aesthetically pleasing tends to make me appreciate it more, and it.
That is a whole thing.
Convince myself that it's tasty, and it
it's
usually is. Don't get me wrong.
It's a psychological thing that they've studied.
Really?
Yeah.
But I will say this though, if I do that, so if I do have a starch, then I try to, so we'll get some fiber and dice up red and green bell peppers to go in the rice or something like that. And if I've got that and there's nothing that's yellow on the plate, then what can I make some squash? So there is something to that
it's fun.
They go hand in hand, like the aesthetic nature and then also the taste and the
so you'll be more interested in eating it if it looks aesthetically pleasing. And if you try and get all of the colors on your plate, you will oftentimes not repeat the same recipe over and over again.
I'm not sure I've ever made the same thing twice. Especially that chili that I made for you, Eric.
Nice.
I don't know if you've tried it yet. It's all one color, but it's so good. Please go ahead.
But it's got a lot of red, which is good.
Yeah.
But so that's one thing that you can do is, eat the rainbow. Try and get as many colors on your plate at once. White is okay too. Cauliflower's white. Believe it or not, regular potatoes are okay.
There's a whole diet based on potatoes.
Yeah.
Potatoes as a starch are not as villainous as people make out to be, right?
No.
Okay, hang on. All right. Before you even answer that, I need to run this by you. Have you heard about this potato diet that originated, I want to say in the 30s or something like that?
Yeah.
Where this is where your biochem maybe comes in. I don't know. The composition of the starch changes the more times you cook the potato, right?
Yes.
And it becomes less digestible or less easily digested, so it's a lower glycemic index or something. Am I getting this right?
Yep.
Because I would love to eat potatoes all the time, so I just need to know how to do that.
And then the other thing is eat the skin.
Oh,
So and when you're washing it, it seems gross, but dirt is okay, guys. But don't.
She's from the north.
Don't scrub everything off the skin,
right?
Because the minerals that the plants absorb come from the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you scrub, well, one, you peel the skin off. Two, you scrub and,
All your
an inch of
vitamins are
its
gone.
life. A lot
Yep.
of it's gone.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of left with the carbs part of it.
Not
Not
terrible.
bad. Again,
not
not
terrible.
something to be scared of.
But less complete, right?
Yeah, it's just less complete. You're going to miss out on all those really, really great, minerals. And yeah, so that leads me to my next point of eating more complex carbohydrates. And what I mean by that is more of the whole carbohydrate and more fiber.
Okay, so what's an example? You've already said simple sugars or simple carbohydrates is like a sugar additive or something like that, right? What's a complex carbohydrate?
Complex carbohydrate is, so the best example I can think of is rice, because we both know that there's brown rice and there's white rice.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the times when we look at our carbohydrates, wheat, popcorn, all those things, they have that's my favorite carbohydrate.
Yeah.
It's also my favorite whole grain. It is a whole grain. You learn something new every day.
I just did.
Amen for popcorn. Anyway, so a complex carbohydrate will have the entire makeup of whatever carbohydrate it is. So, for example, for rice, it's going to have the outer kind of shell of it, and then it's going to have the inner. The outer shell is where a lot of the fiber resides. It makes it harder to process. So a lot of the times when, companies want to do things in mass production, they'll often strip the shell off so that you have white rice. It's a lot easier to process.
That's the difference between brown rice and white rice. White rice is the shell.
White rice is just the inside of it.
Okay.
Missing the shell.
Because I prefer white rice. I think it tastes better, but
well, it's
if
probably
it's
got a different taste because of the shell.
If I can convince myself, however, that when I'm eating brown rice, I'm actually also eating white rice because it's in there somewhere.
It is in
there. Maybe I'll be more likely to eat brown rice. Okay.
But what happens? The difference between when you're eating like a complex carb versus a simple carb is when your body digests it, it's going to break it down into the simplest sugar we can, which is glucose, and that is going to be absorbed, put into your bloodstream, and the rest is history. When it is a simple carb, it's really easy to break down and really easy to absorb, and it will cause your blood sugar to spike. That'll cause a lot of insulin to rush out, be secreted from your pancreas, because we have to, pull the sugar from your bloodstream, and there's a lot of sugar there. When you have a complex carb, there's fiber present. There's a lot of fiber present. Our bodies were not made to digest fiber. We don't actually really use it for energy. So what happens is it kind of literally physically gets in the way of the absorption process. So it slows the absorption process down. You'll get more of a steady blood sugar release. So you're going to feel, you're not going to have a spike and a crash. This is especially important if you have diabetes, because you don't want those blood sugar spikes. And even if you don't have diabetes, constant blood sugar spikes can lead to type 2 diabetes. That's an aside. But it's going to slow the absorption process down. It's also going to, make sure it collects waste products on its way out, so that we can, get rid of the toxins that don't belong. And excrete them. But the biggest thing is in terms of like carbohydrates and is that absorption, slowing that absorption down.
So are there studies that associate a higher fiber diet with lower chronic systemic inflammation then? Okay.
Yeah, so that's where the glycemic index comes from. So typically simple sugars are going to have that high glycemic index because it's going to shoot your blood sugar up. And then foods that are higher in fiber are going to be on the other end of that list. So you want to try and keep lots of fiber. And that comes from, keeping the skin on your apples. You don't have to necessarily eat your orange peels, but when you're buying orange juice, this isn't everybody's cup of tea, but, pulp is nice.
Pulp's so good.
I like it too.
Something just occurred to me, though, the inconsistencies in human behavior, right? Because if I caught somebody peeling an apple, I'd be like, there's something wrong with you.
I know.
But also if I witnessed somebody eating the skin of an orange, I'd be like, there's something wrong with you, too.
What are you doing?
So, yeah.
Yeah. So lots of fiber. That's going to help with, digestion, and it's also going to feed your gut microbiome, which we're also learning is got things to do with pain as well, because it is kind of your frontline immune system. There is a brain-gut connection, immune-gut connection, which is really cool. That would be another great podcast we could go on forever about. But it's going to promote healthy gut microbiota, your buddies in your belly. Right. And they're going to help digest your food better. So there's that. Protein is really good. Obviously not in too high of an amount, because too much protein is also linked with kidney failure. So that's why a lot of bodybuilders often will have kidney issues.
No, I've seen some research to push back on that a little bit. Not that I'm a bodybuilder, but I do like a relatively high protein diet. But I've seen some research lately that for healthy kidneys, if your kidneys are already healthy, then higher protein intake is fine. However, there are some populations that may partake in other behavioral activities that compromise healthy kidney function, and then the effect of protein really is deleterious.
Yeah, and when I mean high protein, I mean like high protein, like you're living off of chicken and
sorry.
There's carbs in there, but like you're really not eating anything else. And there are people that they're living off of protein. That can be really hard on your kidneys, especially. And it's causing some people to have kidney problems young. And a lot of people don't know that they have kidney issues because they don't go to their annual physical. This is a plug to go see your doctor for your annual physical. Get your blood work done.
Well, and I should point out that a lot of chronic kidney disease is irreversible.
Yeah.
You can maybe stop it in its tracks by changing your behavior, changing your diet, but once you've done some damage to those little guys, they kind of tend to stay that way.
Can't really go backwards.
Right.
But yeah, so complex carbs are nothing to be scared of. The media makes it out to be a scary thing. And then the other one is fats, that apparently everybody is scared of. They're nothing to be afraid of. You just want to eat the right kind.
Is the right kind of fat butter on your popcorn?
I wish. Oh. In moderation, yes.
Well, you just fell out of the contention for favorite episode ever.
I'll excuse myself now. In moderation, I'll asterisk that. In moderation, butter on your popcorn. But you want to stick with the healthy fats, which on your food label are going to be your unsaturated fats. So those are called your monounsaturated They sometimes are broken down on the food label. If it's unsaturated, it's usually pretty good. So that will include things like your omega-3s and your so omega-3 is the big one.
I'm pretty sure that everybody's heard of saturated versus unsaturated fats. What's the difference between the two? So the difference,
again, biochem nerd.
Please,
coming out.
That's why I asked.
And we'll also throw in trans fats, even though we don't have to worry about them as much now. So saturated versus unsaturated is basically just talking about their chemical structure. So if you're looking at it under a electron microscope, you basically have, when you're looking at a fat, you have this carbon chain. So all these carbons holding hands, and then you have so carbons basically will have 4 hands to hold, and 2 of them will be holding other carbons, and then the other 2 will be holding hydrogen molecules. And what happens is sometimes when you're talking about like a saturated fat, they're all just holding one carbon's hand, holding the other one on the other side. Sometimes when you're talking about unsaturated, they'll hold the same carbon with 2 hands, and you'll have a double bond, is what we call it, a double bond between 2 carbons. And what happens when you have a double bond is it puts a kink in the chain, just based off of the way electromagnetic fields work. It'll put a kink, and it'll look a little bit janky. And so...
Highly scientific term.
Yeah, very scientific. It's janky. So saturated fats are straight because they're all just in line holding each other's hands. Unsaturated are kind of crooked. And when you look at in terms of disease progression, especially in cardiovascular disease, what happens is the saturated fats tend to stack really easily on top of each other, and that can start to cause problems like plaque buildup and all that, everything, and that can actually
Clogged arteries.
Yeah, and it can start to lead to those kinds of things. Whereas unhealthy or unsaturated, they have trouble stacking because they're all kinked up. The other thing is based on their chemical properties and how they interact with other molecules in our body, especially our cholesterol. We have our good and our bad cholesterol. Saturated fat tends to interact more with our bad cholesterol and drive it up. So we're actually learning that the dietary cholesterol doesn't have as big of an impact on the cholesterol number you see on your lab work compared to saturated fat, which is interesting. So eggs are not scary, everybody.
Right. That what a lot of people get hung up on that though, and I understand how it can be confusing because as we learn more, our informed opinion, what we infer from the science, changes. That doesn't mean that, this is right or wrong or that's right or wrong. Obviously, there is our current understanding.
Right.
But the egg, people always come back to the egg.
It's the eggs.
Because there was a time where it's like,
they're not eating
eggs are great. They're fantastic. We grew eggs on, we didn't grow eggs, but we had eggs on our farm and, the chickens grew the eggs and then we took them from them, yada, yada. But then it's like, the yolks are horrible, right? So you can eat eggs, but only eat the whites.
Yeah.
And now, we're realizing, but the point is that opinion has changed, not because nobody knows what they're talking about. It's because we're continually learning more, and people like Dr. Strath are out there, experimenting and learning more about diet and how the body uses diet and different, I guess, effects that diet has on the body. And as we learn more, we learn that, maybe we were wrong before. It's one of those cases.
Yeah.
And also eggs are good.
Oh, yeah. Well, my humble opinion about eggs is that yolk has enough nutrients in it to grow another organism, right? Like that is when an egg is fertilized and the mom's sitting on it, it's getting all its nutrients from the yolk. And by the time it hatches, the whites are still kind of there, but the yolk is what grew that little baby chick. And I'm like, that's got enough nutrients to produce life. Then I'm gonna eat it.
I should have 3 of those in the morning.
Yeah, well, actually, that is the you can safely. They recommend if you want to eat eggs, 3 a day is fine, and you shouldn't see much change.
I haven't seen any. I haven't grown feathers yet or anything.
So
but I'm also feeling pretty good.
Exactly. But yeah, so eggs are great. They're a great source of protein. They have a lot of those good fats in there. They've got a lot of vitamins and minerals in there. Like I said, because it can grow a whole being.
Yeah.
So eggs are fine, and then that kind of that healthy unhealthy fat kind of brings you to what your cooking oils you're choosing to cook with. So things like lard and butter, those are going to be higher in saturated fats. Because remember, we are talking about the ability to stack.
Right, the stackable ones.
So the stackable ones are going to be more solid at room temperature because they have the ability to stack. The unsaturated are going to be more liquid at room temperature. So those are your olive oils, your avocado oils, your vegetable oils, all those kinds of things. So when you're making those decisions, to cook with things, every now and again, I cook my eggs in butter because it tastes good. Sometimes you just have to, feed your soul.
Irish butter.
Exactly.
It's my plug for Irish butter.
But should I be doing that with everything and cooking with 12 sticks of butter all the time? No. Right. I should probably swap it out with something.
Keep it to 6. 6 sticks of butter.
Yeah, not 7.
Right.
6 is the max. But yeah, so
7 if you have popcorn.
Exactly, 7 for popcorn. Just
Not really.
douse it anyway. But yeah, so those cooking oils are important.
You'll need to turn off airplane mode.
Hey,
we're
Siri.
gonna cut that out in post-production. You won't hear any of that.
And then when you are cooking with those oils, making sure you pay attention to their smoke point so that you don't burn it. One, it tastes bad. It gets really bitter. The oils will get bitter and your food will
I'm
taste
learning
bad.
something right now. Okay.
2, what's going to happen, going back to our oxidative stress, is heat is going to basically promote the fat molecules to start to disintegrate a little bit, not in a great way. and they're going to break apart and produce free radicals. And then you'll be consuming more free radicals that way.
So keeping your cooking oils below their smoke point.
Yeah, so you don't, sometimes like if you're cooking steak and all those things, you kind of want it to smoke a little bit. That's for flavor. But again, moderation. Don't
this
do it
tastes like free radicals.
all, unfortunately, to burst everyone's bubble, anything burnt has free radicals in it. But again, moderation is key. Our body was designed for moderation. It's designed to,
We're highly adaptive organisms.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It's got mechanisms in place. If you want to have like a really well done steak, you're probably going to be okay. I don't know if my opinion of you will be okay because I am a medium rare kind of girl, but
Hardy people. I told
hardy
you.
people. But yeah, so anything that's burnt, smoking, will have the presence of free radicals.
Okay, I am going to make, because we are short on time, I'm going to make one of my least graceful pivots ever.
All right.
Because speaking of cooking, here it is. In 3, 2, 1. Speaking of cooking, you're involved with a program that I wanted to expose more people to, and I'm sure that you did as well. So can you tell us a little bit about Cooking Well?
Yes. So Cooking Well is a nonprofit. It's based in Birmingham, and it was founded by Judy Van. She's my Southern Fairy godmother, as I call her. And I met her while I was at UAB, and we've kind of just combined forces because she is very talented in the field of gathering people and getting people around the table. And, she calls herself
I like people like that.
Yeah, she calls herself a glorified party planner, but she's way more than that. Love you, Judy. And then what I bring to the table is like the education piece. So what we do, the whole point is to, 1, build community within the city of Birmingham, and then 2 is to provide free nutrition and culinary education. So it doesn't matter where you're from, how much money you make, all those kinds of things, because a lot of cooking and nutrition classes are so expensive.
Yeah.
So we found a kind of Cooking Well equivalent-ish. We think we're better, but we're biased. And it was about $600 a head.
Oh, and so you're providing the same service for free. How would people get at this information?
So our main platform is Instagram. So it's at cooking.well.
I'm glad you're doing that with your hand, because I'm going to have Kat put that in post-production right under your hand.
Yes, at cooking.well. And we post all kinds of as much as you can on Instagram, just nutrition facts, hacks, cooking tips, recipes, all those things. But in the bio of the Instagram is a fillable form and if you ever want to sign up for classes, you can through that form, and then the next time the class will start, because we do classes both in person and online.
Really?
So we do it on Zoom. So COVID actually really kicked that off. We were all primarily in person.
So now you don't have to be in Birmingham to get in. Are the classes also free?
The classes are free. They are all free. And so what we do is we've broken it up into, right now we have 3 courses that you take. So there's Cooking Well 1, which is like your basics. So we do how to read a food label, serving sizes, because a lot of people think they know how to read a food label and they don't. And that's really important to make informed decisions. A lot of people think they know what a serving size is.
We're not very good at that in America.
We won't talk about that. It's depressing. But then, so we do that. We talk about, what are carbs? First of all, why should we not be scared of them? What do they do for our body? What happens if we, eat too much and too little of them? We do the same thing for fats, proteins, and then vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. That's the first class. And then it's paired with culinary modules. So we basically flip-flop every week. So the first week, for example, we talk about vitamins and minerals. The culinary piece the next week is going to be a meal high in vitamins and minerals, and also cooking techniques that don't kill off all of the vitamins and minerals that are in the food, because vitamins are light, heat, acid sensitive. So if you're, cooking it for 8 hours a day, yes, it's a pepper. Does it have the same vitamin C content? Probably not. So talking about things like that. And
what if you cook it low, like chili? This is where you say, that's a good question.
That's a good question.
Thanks.
Josh.
All right, go ahead. Please continue.
Yeah, that we'd have to work on that. Tomatoes tend to be a little hardier.
Mm-hmm.
They're hardy. They're hardy people like us.
Especially northern tomatoes.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Those northern tomatoes. But, talking about cooking techniques that will optimize the vitamin mineral content. And then the same thing goes, next week we learn about carbs. We're going to do maybe a carbohydrate alternative. So we do typically like a spaghetti squash. So trying to expose people to things too that maybe they wouldn't have thought of or saw in the grocery store and they went, I don't know what this is, so I'm not going to cook with it. And that's kind of where Cooking Well began because, so Judy used to work for kind of like an inner city mission company within Birmingham. And she would follow kind of the benevolent food distribution around because Publix in Birmingham is great. Like they will donate so many fresh fruits and vegetables. And so she followed the delivery and she just watched people throw so much food away because they just don't know what to do with it. And that's not their fault. They've just never been exposed to it. Like if you don't know what an avocado is, how do I expect you to know what guacamole is? That kind of thing. So exposing people to food that they otherwise wouldn't have known. Doing it on a budget is a big one. And then also promoting being around a table together because there's just so much good psychology that is there. And
about sharing meals with other people.
It is probably one of the most important things you can do, especially with your kids. And just people in general, because especially with Cooking Well, because it's free and anybody can come. We get a lot of people from various backgrounds who wouldn't necessarily run into each other on the street. And if they did, they probably would just go, oh, hey, and they wouldn't actually get to know each other.
Get to interact, yeah.
And so a lot of the time you have people that come from complete opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of like class, just socioeconomic stuff, all those things that are finally finding common ground and can finally be like, oh, I see your point of view because we've had this shared experience over a shared thing that we do, which is eat and like to eat food. So there's that component is huge as well. And then, the second and third courses kind of build on that knowledge of what the carbohydrates, fats, proteins, all those things are and why they could lead into diseases. So what we do in the second one is we kind of start diving into things like eating for inflammation. What is inflammation? How do I manipulate it with my diet? Diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and then we do weight management. So we talk about not just losing weight because I think, that's a very sensitive area for a lot of people.
Sure.
So we try to be very careful with that. But we also talk about something that doesn't really get talked about, which is under eating and the disadvantages to your health that can have. So eating enough and trying to not, another scary word for a lot of people is calories.
Yeah.
Explaining that calories are just energy units. In chemistry, when you have a chemical reaction in a test tube, you write it down in calories. That's the unit. And it's not even food. So
right.
So again, not a scary word. So we talk about disease, and then Cooking Well 3 is our newest one because we'd finished Cooking Well 2 and people were like, well, what can we do more? I have more questions. So we talk about autoimmune disorders, mental health, chronic pain, and the gut microbiome in Cooking Well 3, and we're starting the development of Cooking Well 4.
That's exciting. When do you think that'll be released?
Probably in the new year.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm working with a dietetic intern right now. So that's the other thing. We partner with UAB in Sanford, and they do the dietetic interns. They have to do so many hours in order to get their license, and they have to be in various settings. And so we provide them with a community nutrition setting, and we're their preceptors for their hours. So we get a lot of dietetic interns coming through. It's great for me.
Yeah. But for them too, it sounds like a phenomenal experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. They get, right now we're, experiencing what it's like to work with the community. It can be great, but sometimes it can be like pulling teeth of like, okay, do you want to start now? We all have a dietetic intern here for a month and she'd like to get some experience at some point. So it's a challenge sometimes, but it's the most rewarding thing possible because we've had so many cool success stories. My favorite two really quickly being one lady who said she would never eat a vegetable in her life. She's like, you are not going to be able to make me eat a vegetable. And we were like, all right, bet.
Challenge accepted.
She ended up going to culinary school and
wow.
now runs her own catering business.
Wow.
Because she's like, I hate cooking. I hate eating. And now she runs her own catering business.
So
So that
cool.
was so cool. And then there's my favorite story, and I won't say her name to protect her anonymity. Is that the right word?
Anonymity, yes.
Yes, I said it right. But she'll know who she is when she hears this. But she started cooking well, and it was our first like online virtual one. And we came and did the icebreaker, like, oh, what's your favorite food? What's your least favorite food? What do you expect to get out of this class? And she said, I hate salad. I will not eat salad. I hate it so much. And Judy and I are sitting there like, okay, we have salad on the menu for the next 3 weeks, like as a side dish. This is going to be interesting for her. And then to get out of this class, so she had just been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. She has a really long history of cardiovascular disease in her family, and she wanted to lose some weight and get her cholesterol down. And so those were her goals that she had. So she really dug into the curriculum. The first week we made salad. We all looked at her on the screen. We're all and she went, this is actually really good because we used arugula as the base. And so it's kind of got a little peppery taste. And then we did like a homemade lemon vinaigrette kind of a deal. She's like, this is actually, I don't mind this. And so she trusted us with salads from then on. But anyway, so she did Cooking Well 1, Cooking Well 2. And she said, I've lost a lot of weight. I haven't had my labs done yet for the year, but I really want to do more. Like, I feel like I'm, progressing. And so I said, well, my mom and I work out on Zoom at 7:30 in the morning every day, 5 days a week. You're more than welcome to join us on Zoom. Well, let me tell you, she has been the accountability sheriff. Like,
wow.
She is on it. So every day, like, my mom and I will be like, oh, I don't know if I want to do it. She's there. She wants to do it.
That's so cool. What a turnaround.
Yeah, but anyway, long story short is she got her labs redone. She's in remission from type 2 diabetes. She's no longer classified as diabetic.
That's amazing.
Her cholesterol is normal, and she's lost probably close to 50 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, from just diet and exercise. And
imagine that.
I know, right? We would have no idea about that.
First time I'm ever hearing that. Yeah.
But, and again, that's one of those things, too, that kind of speaks to the relationship aspect of Cooking Well, which is really, really cool. So if anybody's interested, there is a Google form in the bio of the Instagram, again, at cooking.well.
You have to go the other way.
Oh,
yeah,
at cooking.well.
There you go.
On Instagram. We're working on a website, but again, it's a team of 2 right now as a nonprofit. So it's coming, but we're primarily active on Instagram. So if anyone wants to take classes, we'll get in touch with you and let you know when the next ones are starting. It's all free because
that alone should draw some interest. Yeah,
it's all free because I personally believe that we all eat. This is all things that we do. You should know how to do it.
Right.
Yeah. So
I think that's I hate to say it, but we've run over on time.
Oh,
so I think that's a fantastic part to end on.
Yeah.
Normally, after somebody has come on for one episode, I determine whether it would be worthwhile to have them back. Now, you did 2 episodes.
I made it.
No, you've already done that. So that counted as your one episode.
Yep.
I will say this, though. Thank you so much for coming on. And I think you've made the list for when I circle back and re-invite people to come back. I feel like there's still plenty we could talk about.
Oh, yeah. We've got lists to talk about.
That's true. That's true. All right. So, but in the meantime, Dr. Strath, thank you so much for coming on. And I think that particularly ending on that note with Cooking Well, there's plenty of information that people can take home and apply and get healthier.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I love chatting with you,
Likewise.
Both recorded and not recorded. So
thanks.
Anytime.
All right. We'll do it again.
Thank you for joining this episode of The Price of Pain. Opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the host and guests, and not representative of the University of Florida or parent institutions of our guests, unless specifically stated. You can find more information about Price on the World Wide Web at price.ctsi.ufl.edu. And keep up with our researchers on social media by searching Facebook for UF Price, by following @UF_Pain on Twitter, and Price of Pain Podcast, all one word, on Instagram.